Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Rose by Any Other Name, the Sisters Texas Mystery Series Book 10 by Becki Willis, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Chief, I just saw a dead body. It was the fourth such call in the last 5 minutes. So far, when pressed for details, not a single caller could provide specifics. With a little hope this call would prove different, Chief of Police Brash de Cordova struggled to hold in a sigh. It came with the territory when living in a small town. For some people, without a mall in which to shop or a theater in which to watch, neighbors' windows and neighbors' lives filled the gaping void. Anything out of the ordinary became suspicious. Anything new became suspect. Most telling of all, to those who craved excitement and who had little else to entertain them, the mundane became interesting. As an officer of the law, Brash gave due diligence to every report that crossed his desk. Even when it proved a waste of time and precious resources, he was duty-bound to investigate, particularly a claim as serious as this. He gave today's source of excitement the same diligence. "Slow down, Henry," he told the man on the other end of the line. "Take a deep breath and start from the beginning." Brash heard a noisy slurp of air rattle through Henry Beale's lungs as he heeded the advice. "Now, let's see. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, I noticed some stirrings over at Nelda's old house. It's been vacant for..." "Not that beginning, Henry," Brash broke in. "Tell me what happened today." "Well, now today, 2 moving vans pulled in at 10 o'clock sharp. I know because I was just coming home after dropping Sadie off at work. It's her day at the library, you see. She usually drives herself, but her car's been acting up lately. Brash cleared his throat. "You mentioned a dead body?" Oh, right. After a good dozen or so trips inside from both trucks, the movers brought something back out. It was one of those big, long rugs you see. It was so heavy it took 2 of them to move it. That's how I knew a body was inside," Henry reasoned. After taking the first call, Brash made it as far as the hat rack beside the door before the next report came in. Still having made it no further, Brash was tempted to return his cowboy hat to the rack and sit back down. This latest eyewitness was clearly no more dependable than the others. "You're sure it was a dead body inside the rug?" He kept his tone conversational, tampering the skepticism he felt. "Just as sure as you're sitting at your desk." "Here's the thing, Henry. I'm not at my desk. I'm trying to get out the door to head that way. That's why I need to know what you actually saw. Why do you think there was a body inside?" "Both of those men were huffing and puffing," Henry explained, "like they carried something mighty heavy. That rug didn't bend in the least, so I know it had something wrapped up inside." The lawman bit back a groan. "And you naturally assumed it was a body." His sarcasm was lost upon the older gentleman. I've seen it happen more than once. On television, you see. Just last week, Sadie was watching a rerun of Matlock, and this very thing happened. John Paul Nobles was the guest star, and his character was killed and wrapped up in a rug, just like that man today. And what man was that? Who was he? "I reckon the one from the car." Brash snapped to attention. 3 other reports, and this was the first he had heard of a car. It was the closest thing he had to a solid lead. "Can you see the license number of the car from your house?" He dug into his shirt pocket for the notepad and pen he habitually carried for just this reason. "What's the make and model?" "Afraid I can't tell you that," Henry Beale said. "It drove off about 5 minutes ago, you see." Allowing the notepad to fall back into his pocket, Brash's hopes fell along with it. "Henry," he said carefully, trying to keep the censure from his voice, "if the man from the car was the man in the rug, how did it drive away?" "I reckon it must have been one of those delivery men." From previous reports, he knew the moving vans were already gone. "Do you happen to know how many men arrived? Were they one short when they left?" "Didn't count how many came originally, but 4 left," the older man supplied. His answer came as no surprise. 2 men per van was customary. Brash tried a different angle. "Did the car leave at the same time as the vans?" "Don't know. One of the vans blocked my view. By the time they both moved along, so had the car." Frustration mounted within the lawman. "And you have no idea what kind of car it was?" "It was a dark color. One of those newer sedans you see, the kind with only 2 doors." Reports of the vans had been just as vague. No one could remember the name of the moving company emblazoned on the side. No one agreed on the color or the size of the vehicles. Without specifics, Brash couldn't call in a bolo, not without sounding like an idiot. For a moment, he imagined how the call might sound. Be advised, be on the lookout for 2 vans of undetermined color leaving the Juliet-Naomi area and going in an unspecified direction. The vehicles are described as either ordinary panel vans or medium-sized haulers. According to witnesses, they could be either blue or white, or possibly orange. They may or may not have identifying graphics on the side. They may or may not be a late model, 2-door sedan traveling with them, unknown dark color. Brash shook his head to clear the ridiculous chatter from his brain. Thanks for calling, Henry. I'm on my way. Vina Jones caught his eye as he barreled from his office. His expression told her everything she needed to know. The older woman of undetermined age went by many titles: dispatcher, desk clerk, moral compass. Brash simply referred to her as the glue that held the department together. He dreaded the day she finally made good on her threats to retire. She offered a woeful expression as he barged across the room. Sorry, Chief. I thought this one could be solid. If you learn anything useful, take the information and push it through. Should have known it was bogus when Arlene Kopetsky claimed she witnessed a murder, Vina muttered with a smirk. All she saw was a man in a suit go in, and a couple of hours later a rolled-up rug come out. To her, that equated murder. Did she happen to mention a car? No, only the moving vans. With a nod of parting, Brash hurried out the door before another car detained him. 4 minutes later, Brash pulled up in front of Nelda Goldberg's formerly vacant house. The small 4-square on Sycamore had sat empty for well over 3 years, ever since the owner moved into an assisted living center in Conroe. Having not driven past the house in a while, the police chief was surprised at the changes greeting him. The dormant grasses had been tamed and groomed. Overgrown hedges were trimmed. Potted rose bushes bloomed along the porch. Even the faded clapboard siding wore a fresh coat of pink paint. Someone new had moved in. Brash took a moment to survey the scene before him. To the outward eye, it looked calm and relaxing. Pristine came to mind. Yet, according to eyewitness reports, a heinous crime took place here less than 15 minutes ago. Now it was up to him to reconcile the 2 vastly different tales and make sense of the deficit. He paid careful attention to the ground as he made his way up the walkway to the front door. There were obvious signs of heavy traffic, consistent with movers scurrying back and forth with furniture and boxes. His trained eye looked for traces of blood. As he took the steps up and across the porch, he saw the telltale trace left by 2 or more pairs of rubber-soled work boots, the slightly muddy heel print of a single cowboy boot, and a scattered pattern left of pointy heels of a woman's pump. Eyes cast downward to study the tracks crisscrossing the porch, Brash was aware of the front door opening before he knocked. As his gaze fell upon the aforementioned pair of pumps, his analytical mind processed the scene as he observed it. Leather pumps in butter yellow, 2-inch heel, trim ankles, shapely calves. Nice tan, most likely fake. Slight smudges around kneecaps and ankles suggesting a hasty application. Hemline shorter than Maddie wears, but still modest. Flared skirt over flared hips, dresses predominantly pink roses on a muted background. Just enough yellow to justify the shoes and matching belt cinched around a slim waist. Toned arms, generous bust. Squared neckline just a skosh above too low. Heart-shaped locket on a slightly tarnished chain, rose-tinted lips puckered just like a rosebud, slightly flared nostrils, straight nose, wide space gray eyes, hair too black and shiny to be natural. Dressed as she was, Brash suspected the woman was the real estate agent. "Hello, officer!" The woman's voice was soft and delicate, bringing to mind the petals of a rose. Come to think of it, she even smells like a rose. Brash's nose twitched ever so slightly. The scent of roses always made him want to sneeze. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Chief of Police Brash de Cordova." He took the rim of his hat as he introduced himself. "Mind if I come in?" The smirk melted into a brilliant smile. The woman stood back from the door and opened it wide, welcoming him inside. Brash swept the room with his dark gaze, taking in the scene. His brown eyes darted around the room, pinging from one area to the next. 14 by 16 room, typical of the era. Large picture window on front wall, offering maximum visiting for nosy neighbors. No curtains yet. Traditional placement of furniture, all stylishly neutral. Could be straight from any discount warehouse showroom floor. No signs of struggle or disturbance. Surprisingly neat and orderly for move-in day. No rug. To what do I owe the honor, officer? That pedal soft voice spoke from close behind him. Brash turned with caution, not surprised to find the woman standing a tad closer than considered appropriate. Instead of answering, the chief of police presented her with his signature expression. Half frown, half arched eyebrow, nostrils slightly flared. He had perfected the look years ago during his days as a college football coach. One crooked brow could silence the most vehement outburst. The imperial gesture had served him even better as an officer of the law. In spite of herself, the woman took a step backward. "I didn't catch your name," he said. The words were polite enough, but his tone asserted the fact he was in charge of the conversation. To her credit, the woman didn't cower. She thrust her hand forward, the corners of her rosebud-shaped mouth lifting into a smile. "Rose Belvedere." "You are the real estate agent?" he guessed. "Oh, goodness, no." With her one hand still curled around his, she placed the other against the too-low neckline. "I'll be living here. I'm the newest member of your charming little town." His brown gaze never wavered from her face. His peripheral vision confirmed what he suspected. No ring. "Forget being a skosh too low," he grumbled to himself. "I know this old trick. Not gonna look." Instead, Brash offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "In that case," he said stiffly, "welcome to the Sisters." "The Sisters? But isn't this darling little town called Juliet?" "Yes," he confirmed, but collectively referred to the community as the Sisters. "Naomi is just across the railroad tracks." He suspected she knew as much. "Well, they're both just darling." Ignoring his none too subtle social clues, Rose Belvedere reclaimed her spot in his personal space. "And I'll feel so much safer now," she purred, "knowing you'll be here to watch over me. Living all alone in a big old house can be frightening at times." Brash refused to back away, allowing his scowl to put the proper distance between them. "My officers and I do our best to protect all citizens, ma'am," he assured her. He tugged his hand free of hers and hooked his thumb into his duty belt. The audacious woman trailed her eyes over the breadth of his chest, openly appreciating the way the movement pulled the khakied cloth taut. Brash thought of those damnable pictures of him on the internet shown shirtless and taken completely out of context. Inwardly, he grimaced. Outwardly, he was unaffected by her ogling. "I came by," he told her, "to make certain everything was all right. Any troubles here today?" "Now, why ever would you ask that?" Rose Belvedere asked, cocking her head at an extreme angle. Her hand fell to her waist, where she propped it upon a shapely hip. Again, a pose he was familiar with. Again, his eyes remained on her face. He hadn't missed her brief look of surprise at the question. "The neighbors mentioned a bit of unusual traffic today." "Well, of course," she said. She waved a ringless hand around the living room. "This was move-in day. There were 2 moving vans on my lawn. Of course there was unusual traffic." Brash followed her hand movement with his body, using it as an excuse to shift away from her. He stole a glance into the adjoining rooms, but saw nothing unusual in the brief perusal. "You'll find that we have a very engaged community," he told her, choosing to spin it in a positive manner. Engaged sounded so much nicer than nosy. "There's an active neighborhood watch program, so not much escapes notice." The rosebud lips appeared again, pinched into a tiny bud of disapproval. "Good to know." She looked anything but pleased. "Part of the charm of small-town living," Brash assured her. He reasserted his reason for stopping by. "So everything went smoothly with move-in? No unexpected problems?" Her shrug was noncommittal. "The normal ups and downs, a dropped box here, a scuffed wall there." A cunning light moved into her eyes, making Brash inexplicably nervous. The tight bud of her lips flowered into a sudden and unexpected smile. "As a matter of fact," she said, "I did have one problem I could use your help with, if it's not asking too much." Sensing a trap, his answer was evasive. "I'll help if I can." She didn't bother to step to one side and go around him. Instead, Rose pushed entirely too close as she leaned across him, flooding his senses with her rose-scented aura. "I need to hang this picture," she purred, "but I can't quite reach that high. You're so strong and tall. I'm sure it won't be any trouble at all." She used her best provocative pose to reach behind him, but it was lost upon the police officer. He was busy fighting off a sneeze. She produced a framed print and motioned vaguely to a spot behind the couch. "If you would be so kind." Brash practically snatched the print from her hands, wielding it between them like an armor. "Do you have something to hang it with?" he asked, giving the back brackets more attention than they deserved. "I have some of those sticky strips in the kitchen," she said. "If you'll point me in the right direction," he offered, hoping to get a better look in another room. "No bother, I'll get it." If she put an extra swing into her hips as she left the room, Brash missed it. He was already peeking behind the couch, looking for signs of blood or possible scuff marks. He saw neither. He snapped back to attention as her heels tapped out her approach. "Here we go," she said brightly, holding the plastic strips up for view. Brash easily reached behind the sofa and held the picture in place. He was hardly surprised to see it was a rendition of a single rose. "About here?" he asked. "Oh, I'll show you," she insisted. Rose hurried to the sofa and proceeded to climb atop the cushions on her knees. She inserted herself between Brash and the picture, managing to crawl her way between his outstretched arms. "More like here," she insisted, moving the frame a mere smidgen of an inch. When she turned around with a bright smile, her glossy black hair tickled his cheek.